whatever happens. And hello to Quentin from France, Paris. Woo! Send us over the good cheese.
What's up, Mark? Mark saying hello. Oh man, there's some rivalry going on. Boston and Philly, yeah. Super Bowl
Titletown
2.0.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Go Eagles. There we go. So we've got Steli trying to reestablish his internet connection. Hopefully he'll be joining us in a couple minutes. Either way, we're going to go ahead and get started at 5:05 Mountain Time, 4:05 Pacific. A couple more minutes, guys. So tell us where everyone is tuning in from tonight. Brisbane, Australia. Nice. Estelle in Seattle. Rob in Boise. All right.
Cool. I have another one for the last minute. If you could tell me what's the takeaway you want? What's the one takeaway you want from this 1 hour? What do you want to learn? Or what? Yeah, just let me know what you want, and we'll try to deliver as well as possible. And if I can't deliver, I'll just put it on Ilya. Ilya will deliver.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, the man can deliver.
More coffee. Gee, you got to deliver some coffee.
Yeah, I can do that. Tell me something I don't know.
How do your individual companies use marketing automation? That's a really good question.
That's a really good one.
Tell me something I don't know, Guillaume. That's a tough one.
This is Francois. Yeah, I can show some cool stuff. Cool. Ryan, ready to get started?
Let's do it. So Steli's going to join us when he can, if he can. He's having some internet connectivity issues. So in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started. So we've got Ilya on, CEO of Datanize, and we have Guillaume, growth at Drift. So for everyone, welcome. Thank you for making the time to join us. If you have to dip out early, we're going to go ahead and send around a recording after this is over. So send this around to anyone who may have missed it on your team as well. Let's get started. Would you guys actually mind introducing yourselves a little better than I just did first, please?
Sounds good. Thank you, G. Yeah, my name is Ilya. I'm the founder and CEO of Datanize. We're about 5-year-old company, 50 employees. What we do, we provide technographic, firmographic data as well as buy-in signals. So we're all about data. Data is in our name. Datanize. So yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So I'm Guillaume Cabane. People usually call me G. It's simpler, shorter. I come from France, the land of cheese and good croissant. Moved here 2 years ago. I'm the VP of growth at Drift. Drift is a conversational platform. We help businesses buy from businesses. And before that, I was in charge of growth at Segment, at Mention, and I started 15 years ago at Apple in BizDev. So that's what I do, and I leverage a lot of data vendors, and I work with, say, Datanize and others to create growth strategies that are unlike any other. So that's what I do.
And we've got Steli Efti, who decided to join us tonight.
Yeah, he's back.
It's 1 a.m. in the morning. This is all for all of you who are watching the recording who said you couldn't make the webinar because it's too late or too early. And 1 minute before the webinar started, my Wi-Fi in this office space that I've broken into died. I mean, you couldn't plan this any more perfectly. So I'm literally using my phone, the hotspot in Germany right now as I'm traveling to make it into this webinar. All right. So where there's a will, there's a way. I also used the wrong link. So I'm Ilya Semin because it's a much more charming name than Steli Efti. And since we're the introduction round, my real name is Steli Efti, not Ilya. I am gonna be representing the prototypical sales guy here, right? So I'm not as smart as Ilya or G, not as data driven as those two, but I definitely care deeply about sales. I run a company called Close.io. It's an inside sales CRM that helps teams around the world close more deals, make more sales. And our main goal is really to eliminate manual data entry and to empower salespeople to communicate more effectively and close more deals and drive more revenue. And if I make it through this webinar, it'd be the biggest accomplishment of 2018 so far for me. But I have a beautiful backup. Ryan is the mastermind behind the webinar. So if I drop in and out, he's gonna save my ass and ask all the smart questions and get all the tidbits and tactics out of Ilya and G that are the main reason why most people have chimed in today to be part of the webinar. All right, guys. So in order to make sure that people get the most value out of this webinar as possible, and I know that both of you care deeply about this, let's jump right into it. And the way that I'd love to start the discussion today with the two of you is, I'm sure we're gonna get into some really nifty hacks and some really sophisticated things and case studies, examples of both things that you guys have implemented, but also have seen others implement. But what I would love to start with is the basic shit, the stuff that kills you when you see startups or companies not do, sales teams not take advantage of, the basic data you think that every sales team should take into account or capture and utilize, that still too many don't, and that don't require a massive engineering team and 24 months to implement. Because I think that in many of the things that we're going to talk about, some sales reps or sales leaders will think, yeah, if I had the resources and time, I could do all this cool stuff, but I'm constantly under pressure. I'm constantly lacking resources and lacking time. What's some basic stuff that nobody has a good excuse for not doing that can make a big difference that you've seen, or mistakes in terms of not capturing data or not utilizing data? What comes to mind first for any of you two?
Yeah, I have two things, fairly easy. And so I just did a hack, and we can go into that later. Just did a hack to survey 400 companies and submit a sales request, a demo request to them. And then I measure the response time and the responses. So see how long they take to respond. You know what's the first sign? So I already had 200 answers, 200 domains I surveyed. You know how many actually followed up? 73 after 5 days, which means it's there's almost two-thirds of the companies who haven't followed up to a demo request, and that's done in my name at Drift, so I have some buying power, haven't followed up in 5 days, right? That's first thing. I mean, basic stuff like follow up. People are asking about your software, and we can go into how I automate that. That's the first thing. Second thing that I see in most companies when I do some kind of auditing, I help them. They don't have basic tracking. They don't understand what's happening. Where are my leads coming from? Who's signing up? Who's churning? And the sales team says, hey, we want to be more efficient. It's not their fault. No, you can't blame them. They don't know. They have no context on the lead at all. They have no context, and the marketing team has no context on the signups. They don't know who's buying. They don't know where they come from. Put some basic tracking. I'm not saying do a complete 200 event tracking thing. Just track the 10 key events in your app and in your acquisition process, and do some basic analysis. So those are two things I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we work with hundreds of companies that came to us because they wanted data, right? And I think we noticed the trend when people come to us and they say, hey, I need leads, I need emails, I need direct dials, I need all of this, I need to boost my pipeline. Usually we see that this people kind of, they're not the most successful companies that we have. On the other side, when we have somebody who come to us and the first thing they ask us, can you guys help us figure out our ideal customer profile? Can you guys help us understand what attributes our customers have in common so that we know who else we should go after, who else we should contact? So I think what drives me crazy is that in a lot of cases, we see companies at this growth stage, they're trying to scale before they actually nailed it. And I think it's really important to understand your customers, and there are a lot of ways to do that better. Whether it's firmographic attributes, technographic attributes, whatever. See that what they have in common, and using this data approach, scientific approach, build your go-to-market strategy instead of relying on your intuition and just saying, okay, we're going to go after this segment of the market because, well, it feels like there is something there. So being more data-driven, I think, is the key for any growth stage company, B2B company at least. So
I love that. So it's almost like I paid you guys to say what I wanted to hear, but I didn't. We actually didn't talk about this at all prior to the webinar. And one of the things that was important is to have like a real fresh and honest conversation. We didn't send you the questions. You guys didn't send any prepared answers. We just said, let's talk and let's share some ideas. So I want to follow up on.
You could send the questions. I would not read them anyways. I don't do my homework.
Well, I barely made it through kindergarten. I don't know how to read or write, so I couldn't really prepare this at all. But let's talk about each of these points, right? And let's actually go backwards, Ilya, with your last point on understanding your ideal customer profile, because I think that's one of those things that is so fundamental to building any sales process that is predictable, repeatable, and scalable. But it's also the thing we all want to kind of sidestep. It's just not sexy. Like, I remember for years hearing people talking about understanding your niche, understanding your customer profile, understanding your ideal customer. And I remember sitting in audiences listening to it, nodding, saying, of course, and then not doing it myself. Like, it's one of those things that's such a basic universal truth that it seems so obvious that it's just not sexy. It's like, cool, yeah, ideal customer, but tell me about the automated email outbound hack that will get me like the next milestone so I can raise money, right? I just want to, it's not a sexy place to stay at. And I think especially because sometimes you have to stick around and you might discover that the person or the type of business that you thought would be your customer really isn't. And then you have to keep digging until you truly understand what is my niche, who is my customer. That's just work that's just not as flashy or sexy. You threw out two terms. One I understand and I heard before. The other one I didn't even really catch. One was technographic. The other one firmographic. I don't even really know what it was.
Sorry,
Talk to us a little bit about those two things. If I want to understand my ideal customer, if I want to actually do it scientifically, not just like persona-wise, it's Bob, and Bob likes tennis, but it's like more data-driven, like a spreadsheet. What ticks off my customer? What are all the data points that I can utilize and that I want to know about in order to create that profile?
Sure. So firmographics, it's basically data about companies' location, revenue, number of employees, et cetera, right? So let's say you can say my ideal customer profile is a mid-sized company located in the United States, which is perfectly normal. A lot of people do that. Technographics is all about technology choices that these companies have. So do they use, what do they use for marketing automation software? Is it HubSpot or Marketo? What do they use for their CRM? Is it Close.io or Salesforce? Sorry. What do they use for live chat? Is it Drift or something else? So all these choices can tell you a lot about your customers. What's funny enough, you mentioned that we actually did not do that for a really long time ourselves, right? It's so funny. And then a couple of years ago, when we already had a few hundred customers, we went back and we said, okay, what are some of the assumptions that we need to check and make sure we're on the right track? And we had an idea. We're like, okay, our targets, should be, mid-size or enterprise companies, mostly US, mostly all these things, right? And what we actually found out once we put our customer list through data, we found out that the most correlated attribute was the usage of marketing automation software like Marketo or HubSpot. So we found out that 25% of our customers used Marketo, for example, versus on average it's under 1%. So what we took from there is we completely changed our lead scoring process. So when somebody came inbound and they were using Marketo, it would instantly be a qualified lead because we knew it's a perfect fit for us. So that kind of the assumption that we had, they're not necessarily true. And we actually became more data driven, it really helped us identify, or maybe I would say clarify, or kind of have a better idea about our ideal customer profile, and that in turn improved our go-to-market strategy.
Love it. G, you mentioned even tracking and capturing some basic data. Let's talk about that, right? Because I see one of two extremes in most cases. Most founders, most companies I look at, they either don't track anything, right? Just literally nothing, or they are trying, they're in the middle of doing this one step that's like, we're going to track 1,000 different data points, which is just like way too much in step one and version one. What are some basic things you think every company should track, or what are some good data points to focus on if you don't know quite what to do to begin with?
You know what's funny is that the past 4 companies that I joined, I had to rebuild the tracking entirely because it was incorrect, and that includes segments. And so that's kind of funny, right? I had to rebuild with the growth team the tracking at segment because it was mostly done incorrectly. And that says something, tracking, everyone values the insights. Everyone values, every CEO, exec team, and I'm sure there's a lot of marketers here, values, the learnings, the automation. No one's ready to put like 2-3 engineers for like a month or two to go deep and do the tracking. No one, right? It's not a sexy project. It's not an interesting project. And so there's 2 ways. Either you can, probably 3 ways. One, you can hide it. You can hustle. So you don't tell the exec team, just like have an engineer do it on the free time, like at the bottom of the stack. That takes like forever. Maybe it kind of works. But the problem then is that you can have like a situation, which is pretty frequent, where you have some new events, some old events, and marketing automation breaks because like you don't know how to like automate the emails on the event. 2, you go silent and you do everything. I did that once at Mention. I spent 2 months doing the tracking across 5 apps with 2 engineers, and it was perfect. Or you roll it out slowly. That's the recommendation, is that you start with like 10 events. And actually, I published a chart a long time ago on what events you should have based on your company stage, right? So if you're like pre-market fit, don't do a huge tracking plan, because like basically people are not using your product, right? If you're just post-market fit, and starting to have some traction, but you don't do acquisition, you're not really like, well, you can add a bit more to understand like who's paying, but you don't really care about like churn and about like things like retention over time, because like your product is 3 months old. So anyways, the churn data is not going to be correct. So there's stuff like that, and then you can just slowly build it out. So what I usually try to do is I try to like rebuild the funnel. So I go see the CEO, I go see like whoever is my leader. I say, okay, now what are the questions you have about the business? And if you draw the funnel on the whiteboard, what does it look like? And the funnel is like a series of like conversion points. And each conversion point is at least 2 metric, right? You got the denominator and denominator. And I say, okay, well, each step, 2 events. Then I have like probably like 5 steps in my funnel. That's 10 events. I do those 10. I give the funnel. I say, oh, do you like it? Can we have some resources to do more? So that's usually how I do it. I try to answer business questions, and I build the events that are required to answer the questions. I don't do events just because I like doing events, even though I do.
So how do you find the questions that companies need to ask in order to reverse engineer what data to track?
Sure. Yeah. So usually I go see the boss and I say, well, in your mind, what's working well? What's not working well? Where do you think the business is hurting? What's growing? Because they have some business metrics. It's not like they don't have any, right? Because like there's if like a medium-sized company like Datanize or Drift or Close, you have someone who's running finance who like basically knows like the number of like paying customers, number of signups. Like they have that, just not in a central database. And so you say, well, like where are we losing people? What's the problem? Is churn a problem? Is acquisition a problem? Is cost of acquisition a problem? Just tell me a bit more like what the problem is. And that's usually how we get there. If we don't know anything, which is rare, if we don't know anything, I'm just gonna try to like reproduce these main steps, which is like people come to my marketing site, okay, track that. People sign up, track that. People pay, people activate, people leave. It's like that's what it is,
I love it. And I think that the other thing The other thing to underline here or double click on from my side is sometimes, and this is really fundamental to many things, is, you talk to a company or a team and they name you a number of problems, but if you dig deeper, it takes usually a little bit of work to create clarity and alignment on what is the most important problem that we're trying to solve, right? Because the first problem that comes to mind might just be the most urgent one, but not the most important one, right? Or the most impactful one. So gaining clarity on like what is the problem that we have or the opportunity we're trying to tackle and what is the most important thing we could tackle and then go after that. Versus trying to figure out what are all the things we'd like to know, which with data I find oftentimes happens. People are just like, here's everything I'd like to know. And when you ask, well, what are you going to do with that information? How is that going to be utilized? There's not really much there.
And a good example, because I work as VP of growth, head of growth, most of my work is working with salespeople and marketing. I kind of like bridge in between. And often you talk to salespeople, the basic problem they have is that we want more leads. That's what they say. No, we want more leads. And so, sure, I could deliver more leads, but actually that's what they say is not what they want. They don't want more leads. They actually want to close more deals. They actually don't want to close more deals. They want more commissions, right? So they want more revenue, right? So they'd be as happy or happier if they could close less deals and get the same commissions, right? Of course, less work, right? So what I need to understand, that's like just experience. I need to understand like, okay, I need to look into like, can we get them higher quality leads, deals? Can we get them people who are going to pay more? Can we get them people who are going to convert more? People who are going to close faster, less friction, Because if I just like hammer them with like, thousands, if I shower them with leads, I'm not going to make them happy, right? And so you got to understand that. And so if we start like bridging like what I do with like what Datanize is like, I try to understand like we were talking about customer fit. Well, am I going to give them leads that have the right customer fit? Are those people going to close at the right price in the right time frame, and the right percentage? And something I learned very early in my career when I was working at Apple in like 2004, 2005, sales team in Cork, Ireland, is that if you go below 10% close rate, humans will hate you as head of Gen, right? Because it means that you're forcing them to actually go in the sales process and lose 9 times out of 10, and that's just like too much to bear, right? So you need to maintain a certain quality bar. So like that volume to quality is super important. So that's how I use data providers. So I use them to source deals, source opportunities, but also to qualify and see if it matches my ideal customer profile.
Sweet. So let's talk about that a little bit. I think that all that goes to the prospecting side of things, right? Which is, I think, a lot where companies want to use data to accelerate sales. They want to figure out who to go after on the prospecting side of things. They want to figure out, how to go after them better. And then maybe we'll get to the second step in the funnel, which is then, once we get after them, once we have a connection, how do we actually, improve sales velocity? How can I close deals faster? Which equates to the same thing as closing more deals, right? It's just like less time spent on making the money. So let's talk first on the prospecting side of things, right? And in both of you guys are actually experts on this. Today, I have a sales team. Let's assume here, otherwise we cannot progress the conversation, that I have an idea who my ideal customer is, right? I have some information, we have some revenue, some customers, and we can identify that a certain amount of them are better customers, more successful customers than others, right? Now we've spent some time looking into the data on what makes them stand out or what do they have all in common. So we have a bit of information about this. Boom, now what I want to do is I want to get more of these kinds of companies either coming into the funnel or our salespeople going out and connecting with them in an outbound fashion. What are some really kind of best practices that you guys have seen out there using data to do that?
Yeah. I can do an intro and then Ilya can follow up on the whys and the how. The intro I can do on that is the very basic answer is you can just look at those best customers. You can like pull data from data vendors like Datanize, to enrich them, and then go back to Datanize and say, hey, I want more of the people that have like the same technologies, attributes, company size, whatnot. And I believe Data actually has that as a feature themselves. You can just like send them your customers and they will like enable you the expansion. And that's static data, and that works well to some extent. You know, it's going to bring you to the point to say, hey, like those people have the same firmographics, as we say, but it doesn't tell you anything about the current intent. It doesn't tell you, you know, like, yeah, maybe they have the right technologies, maybe, you know, they have the right size of a company, but maybe they're just not in the market for my tool right now. And if I contact them right now, I run the risk of burning them. Because if I contact and I push hard, and I know, Steli, you're a man of strong will. So like, if they don't say no, you will continue. And the point is, you might, there's a risk that, you know, they might slam that door shut and it's going to be very hard to reopen. So the second part of the data is, let's say, intent data, which means like what's happening right now that indicates that it's the right moment to contact them. And so the difference here is like not just like what technology, for example, or what company size they have, but how has it changed in the past few days or weeks? Have they added a technology piece? Have they removed something that indicates that is a good signal for me to hop and say, hey, now I know we should talk?
Yeah, I agree. So, you know, the approach we usually take is that once you identify a list of companies you want to go after, then it's really all about buying signals. You know, I get maybe 50 to 80 cold emails a day. I don't respond to most of them because they're just not relevant to me, right? Versus when you reach out at the right time to the right person, that's what makes it click, right? So buying, I mean, there are a lot of, that's the beauty of data right now. There are a lot of buying signals that you can actually see, and you can tell, oh, this company is going to be happy to talk to me right now. You know, it starts with, you know, one example of buying signal, somebody just raised money. It's actually not a good time to talk to them right now because they're too busy with PR and all these things. But what if you could talk to them in 2 months because they raised money because they want to grow? You know, there are things like, you know, there might be sponsoring an event. There are companies right now, there are some vendors that can tell you when somebody's searching for, you know, let's say a CRM solution, like list of CRM solutions, they can tell you which companies actually do that right now. So there are a lot of these buying signals that data providers can give you. And if you, like I said, if you hit the prospects at the right time, there is a possibility they'll respond back to you and they will be more ready to buy. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. And every minute you spend on this accounts or companies that are not qualified is the minute that you don't spend going after companies that are your ideal customer, that fit your ideal customer profile. So you got to be efficient with your time, and you know, got to nail it before you scale it. A lot of people just want to scale it before actually figuring out the right cold messaging, the right cold email, the right sequence. You know, is there an email? Is there a LinkedIn connection? Is there a phone call? So you got to figure it out, map it all out before you can actually go and scale it. So,
sweet.
One thing I said is that, for example, 2 days ago, yesterday, I saw a pretty big deal close in my Slack channel, and I just did the research on like, well, you know, where does that deal come from? And we now have like a fairly large number of signals. We saw that company, that prospect, appear on 4 different signals in the weeks before we were able to like close that deal. You know, and that's really interesting to see that it's not just like one signal tells you, hey, I'm gonna like hammer them. It's like there's like a combination. You know, like they just like Ilya said, like, you know, like the technology moves, they hire someone, they raise some money, and now there's like all that buying motion. You know, and I read something the other day. The number of let's say touches on third-party sites, number of research touches that are being made before they contact the vendor is 12 in average. In average, buyers touch 12 different web properties before coming to you. You know, those are all good opportunities for you to find out that research before your competitor does. The whole game, you know, is that those people who are in the buying motion, there's like two outputs. Either they buy something, you know, or they give up. And if they buy, there's 2 outputs. Either they buy from you or they buy from someone else. You know, your game is to go as early as possible and like make sure they buy from you before they think of anything else. That's it. That's all you have to do. You're never going to convince someone who doesn't want to buy, who doesn't care, doesn't have the time, doesn't have the budget to buy. It's not worth your time. What's worth your time is finding people who actually are willing to buy.
So can you share the 4 signals? Are they generic or are they super specific? What are the 4 signals here?
Yeah, so they appeared. The first one is we use Clipboard Reveal to find out who's coming to our site. And so we de-anonymize the IP traffic. They upvoted us on Product Hunt. So Product Hunt has an API, and they upvoted one of our launchers on Product Hunt, and we also de-anonymized that. They upvoted one of our CEO's posts on LinkedIn, so we grabbed that and we de-anonymized those 2. And eventually they came back and they chatted with us. Right? What's important is the first 3 touches are actually supposedly anonymous touches, and we were able to find out the account, and we know the number of people. Oh, and I forgot one, sorry. They went on GD Crowd. The very first touch is a research on GD Crowd. So you can see how they go from GD Crowd to our website, then our website, they research more. They say, hey, this thing on Product in School, I heard about the company, I vote them. Then I read something on LinkedIn and so yeah. And all of those happened before we were able to talk to them.
Sweet. So let's progress this a little bit and say, how do you take that data? How do you actually present that data to the salesperson that interacts with a prospect? How do you show it to the salesperson? And how have you seen salespeople take that data into the conversation typically? What are kind of best practices and what are some mistakes sales reps do when it comes to utilizing data in the conversation, which I have a lot of opinions about?
Yeah, tricky. I think there's 2 ways. In my past company at Segment, I would automate all of the emails and all of the automation, not only email, but all of the automation to reach out to that company or prospect. And the sales team would be exposed only to the positive answers. That's the first thing. Here at Drift, we have a different buying motion. And so we decided that the salespeople are going to do that. So I expose the raw signal to them in Salesforce, and I send them a Slack message. So each time one of their accounts, or based on the routing rules, the accounts that they own, I find a signal, they're going to get a Slack which says, hey, this company appeared on that signal at that time. Here's the post they are voted. And this is in your Salesforce. And I create a Salesforce activity and I update the source details and source time. So they know they got to get to it. So that's fairly simple. Yeah. Forgot the second question.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Writing the email.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the way we look at this is that sales reps, or actually nobody wants to have another tool they want to log into. They don't want to, remember yet another login. So our philosophy here is very simple. Sales reps usually use 4 things in their day-to-day life. They use their CRM, they use their email, they use a website, they use LinkedIn, and they usually go to a website of the prospect of target account to learn more about this prospect. So our approach is that in all these cases, they have to use their browser. So we try to deliver our data in a Chrome extension so that anywhere they go, they can, our data is just 1 click away. Otherwise, it's just a nightmare to remember all these different tools. So either our data is in CRM or browser extension. You're right; it has to be there, and it has to be 1 click of a button. Otherwise, they're not going to care.
Yeah, I love that. I'll say one thing, one pet peeve of mine, and this is a lot to do more with like salespeople training and kind of like the sales culture of the sales organization, but nobody cares about the data that you have about them, right? Nobody's going to be like instantly won over just because you're like, Steli, I know that you visited our website and you upvoted and you read an article on our blog. Wow, now I instantly want to give you all my money. Like, some people will be creeped out by that. I wouldn't even care. Most normal people will be creeped out by that. But even for me, like, this is nothing that doesn't provide any value in my world, that things about my browsing behavior. So sometimes I see salespeople, because they're getting these the shiny tools of data, and now they know all these nifty little things. They're overly excited about sharing their knowledge with the prospect, which is usually a really bad idea. The other reason why it can be a really bad idea, it depends how.
It kind of depends how. I think early on the relationship, it's gonna creep out the prospect for sure. I think it's possible, and I see my salespeople actually kind of like drop in that stuff at the later stages. For example, like once there's a positive response and engagement, they can say, hey, like, by the way, thanks for voting us on Product Hunt. I saw your name pop up, and like nobody in relationship is, oh yeah, sure, like I saw your name pop up on a Product Hunt post, it's like, nothing like it's public, it's all there, and I think it's kind of different. There's two things that are like separate. One is like company data, and the other one is like public personal data. What's really creepy is private personal data. So you try to avoid talking about that, but like public data, like for example, someone says something on Twitter and you can like drop that, like that's the point of Twitter, otherwise you don't say it on Twitter.
But so I agree with you. I mean, it's not like when a company raises money, you could easily, you need to be careful. I was just about to say, you could easily congratulate on them, but context matters so much, right? And this is why, like, Twitter is the same thing. There was a time where social selling was like a really big buzzword. People like, just go to people's Twitter profile, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and you'll know everything about the person you're talking to. No, right? You have some data points, but it's important to check on them in the conversation with a person to reconfirm that these data points are right. And a simple example of that is, I might tweet that my favorite team is some football team that I actually hate. I lost some bets, so I had to tweet this, right? And the first thing the sales rep does is like, oh, this is also my favorite football team. Like this overly excited way to tell me or connect with me in some public information without taking the time and patience to learn. I know some things about you, and in the conversation, I want to make sure that these facts are actually true, and then I can utilize them to build a relationship and to push a conversation forward. Sales teams and sales reps specifically need a little bit of coaching to utilize that data they have in a powerful way, in a useful way in the prospect conversation versus using it to hammer the prospect with how knowledgeable they are about them already, right? It's a tricky balance sometimes. All right, let's switch gears real quick before we go into the public Q&A side of this. And one cool thing already in chat that I've noticed is that, I've been talking about close, we've talked a little bit about Datanyze and Drift, and people have been giving us mad props. So that's awesome. People are like, the Chrome extension of Datanyze is awesome. I love close. People have been saying nice things about our companies, which is also always great to hear. But let's talk a little bit about like the lead velocity, or helping the sales team once a lead or prospect is kind of in the funnel and is in the conversation. How can we use data? One is signals, right? Capturing signals and certain actions that a prospect takes that further it. But what other things have you seen? Have you done or implemented yourself, or have you seen other companies do really well to utilize data to improve or speed up lead velocity or improve the speed to close? Let's talk about that a little bit.
I mean, I have one, which is like, I repeat a bit what I said earlier, is it's like, you see like all those like movies with like explosions where like there's like the bad guys coming like through the minefield, and you got to wait the last minute. And if you do too early, like you're gonna blow up the minefield, but not the bad guys. Well, a sales motion is kind of the same thing. If you fire too early, too fast, you're gonna miss, right? And so lead velocity is measured from the start of the selling motion, and very often that selling motion starts too early. And once you have signals. So if you say, hey, they added, like, for example, in my case, I use Datanyze to identify competitor movement. And so they add a competitor, they remove a competitor, and like, boom, my sales team is on it, and they're gonna like email them and hammer them. It's too early. It's too early. They just had a breakup. They had a breakup of a vendor. It's like there's an emotional breakup, and you're like, it's good to know. It's good to know. It's interesting. Let's see now who's the right person. What's happening really? Maybe someone left the company. Maybe the champion left. There's like different. We got to know more. It's too early. So that's the first thing. So I say often, sales velocity is measured from a start point, and that start point is wrong. First thing. Second thing is that we often use only one channel. We just use email. Well, a lot of like the salespeople like lives right now is email. And that's sad. It's really sad because everyone does the same thing. And if you do the same thing as your competitors, you're gonna have the same results, right? And you don't want the same results. And so, well, how can you do the same things differently? And you got to look at different channels. And I've used in the past multiple channels on the same lead prospect to nurture them or contact them, preheat them in different ways. I use advertising before sending emails so that there's like brand recognition. I use automated like swag and gift sending a bit later in the process. We talked about like that coffee thing where I've delivered like hot drinks, hot coffees to people who are just at the early of the buying motion. So that there's like a memorable thing that happens from my brand. So that definitely like increases the velocity of like changing channels and make sure that, I got like 100 emails, that are unread every day. And like if you change channel, maybe I'm going to be more open to that.
Yeah, I think, for us, obviously, once the lead is in your funnel, it's up to an account executive for the most part, let's say 90%, to keep pushing this deal. Where data can really help, I feel like there are a couple of things. So number one, sometimes it's useful to know when the fiscal year ends for a prospect, because then you can understand their budgeting a little bit better. You can understand their willingness to spend a little more versus wait a little bit. So it gives you an idea about their timeline. And then the second thing is, I feel like for data to be useful, you gotta, as a salesperson, as an account executive, you gotta kind of separate noise versus signal and really focus on the signal. So really focus on the customers, prospects who are more likely to buy your software, and the rest you kind of keep them, maybe keep them active, keep them engaged, but not spend too much time on that. This is, I think, where data can really help once the lead is already in the funnel.
Yeah, and one last thing I'd say here is that we often think data is for deals, data is for salespeople. Not true. I've used data and other vendors for recruitment a lot. Like hire people from companies I know use the right technology. Perfect. I've used data to hire engineers. Like, hey, like when is their stock plan ending? When are they reaching the 1 year mark? Great. And then you can say, hey, like, I know you just did like the 1 year mark, and like now you can leave it. It's like props you. And like there's multiple ways you can use data. It's not just for sales. That's important to know. And I've made my recruitment team very happy in the past with that.
And recruiting at its core form is nothing else than sales. It's result-driven communication, right?
And there's bigger commissions.
Much bigger commissions. So one thing I'll say is, sometimes the basics are really what can move mountains. And this relates to something G said in the very beginning of the webinar, which is some of the data is not even like out there to be researched, or you don't need to use 10 different sources to analyze and to figure it out. The timing of somebody signing up is a data point. And knowing that within 5 minutes of a trial sign up or a demo request, your chances of reaching that person and having a connection and having a chance to communicate are significantly higher than when you try to reach them an hour later or a day later. That's common sense. Obviously, when I sign up, if you call me within a minute or 2 minutes, chances are dramatically higher that the person is not in a meeting or out in the gym or somewhere else, and they have context.
20 times. I think it's 20 times. I think there's a study of the Harvard Business Review study from 2013, which I believe it's 20 times more in the first 5 minutes than after the first hour.
I hate to disagree with you, but it's actually 100 times. And the reason why I hate to disagree that when I read that, I felt like 100 times seems too much. Like that seems too perfect, but you are right. There's a study out there. So a professor actually ran a real study. It's 100 times higher reach rate. It's insane.
Yeah. So and it's just what you said. It's because they are on your site. Because it's a context switching is a big problem for humans, which most people who are listening to this webinar are. And the thing is, when they're on your site, they are in the context, they have the problem, they feel the pain. Selling, I mean, my wife is a sales rep and she taught me a lot. Selling is about understanding the pain of your customer. What are they trying to solve? And if what they're trying to solve, usually they come to your website, they don't understand what you do. And so they leave because they say, well, this does not solve my problem, because like, that's why we have like 90%, like people who come to our website who don't convert. Your conversion rate is like between 0 and 10%, usually between 0 and 3, So people don't understand. So you can catch them then, at that now and then, catch them and say, hey, I want to understand your problem, and I'll tell you how my tool solves your problem. Then you're going to close it at a much higher rate.
And you're going to significantly improve the velocity, because a lot of times people say, well, but if I call somebody the moment they sign up for a trial, they didn't have time to play with the product and to learn it. I'm like, good. Yeah. I don't want them to spend time.
The product sucks.
All out on their own, right?
Yes, I want most of the time the product sucks. The experience in the product is bad, and the bigger the company is, the worse it's going to be. It's like, for example, like a large enterprise that signs into a SaaS product that needs installation, they are never going to install it, right? Because they need to go through like lots of legal and whatever, right? So like the experience is going to be awful. So you want to, and that's one thing I did in the past. I actually had a sign up where once we detected the company size and like we could place them there, we would prevent them from getting the product. We would say, hey, we should talk. It's like, we call it like white glove onboarding, like you put like marketing words there, but basically it's preventing them to go to the sign up through the product and having them talk to humans, to improve the experience.
All right, so let's get into the Q&A section. Ilya, I have a good question to kick things off for you specifically. All right, so the question here is, how do you use data to sell to people who usually are not on their computer, such as farmers, right? So let's say you sell something to farmers. How do you use data to go after these people? They don't sign up for websites. They don't use forms or add JavaScript snippets on their site to send a signal. What have you seen there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. Thank you for asking me that. I feel like in any situation, any industry you take, I'm not super familiar with farming industry, unfortunately, but you got to figure out, again, the buying signals that you can figure out. Maybe it's the right season. I don't know. I'm going to make things up, right? Like it's probably the most obvious one. It depends on where you're selling them to. If you're selling the software to a farmer that is not even online, well, maybe it's not the farmer that you want to talk to. Maybe you should talk to the farmers that actually use the internet. They have some presence on Yelp, or I don't know what farmers usually use, right? So maybe you should look for technologically sophisticated farmers, and that's your ideal customer profile. Going back to that, so in any case, that's all about just same idea.
Yeah, I can also help you there. I've done that once. I've actually built an experiment where I was using Google Earth, the Google satellite imagery data, and sending that to Scale API, which is like kind of like Mechanical Turk, but like workers, to identify people who had pools and people who don't have pools, and then build rich data sets. I imagine you could do the same thing and like look at the address of the farm. Look, okay, what's the size of the farm? Is there equipment on that farm? Is there new equipment that has moved? What's the size of the barn? And then you can actually like derive from that some metadata that's super useful. And so the message here is you can build your own data sets. I'm sure there's like some public data on the farm size and like what they do on that farm. But if there's not, you build your own data sets. And that's even better because now you have an edge over your competitors.
Love it. All right, so next question right to you, G. What do I do? How should sales teams think about FOMO when it comes to data and using data? So this specific sales manager is basically saying there's always this person's reading all these articles about all these cool ways, new data tools, all these sales stack is exploding. There's all these tools out there. There's all these methodologies out there. When do you choose what to go after, basically? And when do you choose to ignore something because it might seem cool and new, but it might not be useful to you right now? How to deal with FOMO when you're like a data geek in sales?
Yeah, I'd say three things. One, we just said that like following up with your leads fast has a 100x impact. So before you look for new leads, service the ones you have, and make sure that your process gets to them in like 5 minutes, which is actually hard to do. It's actually pretty hard to do. So solve that first. They have the highest intent. They are trying to like give you their money, and you're not giving them like good service. They're there with the $100 bills. Second thing is like look at the highest volume. Like I did analysis, like and I talked at length in past times of like the GT crowd signal. I did analysis of like the volume. GT crowd is great as a buying signal. It's about 1/10 of the volume I get from de-anonymizing traffic on my website, right? Actually a bit less than 1/10, So I gotta look at my priorities, and like if people are coming to my site already and they're not contacting us, handling those is a bigger priority than handling the people who are not even looking at my site and who are looking at competitors on the review website. So the second way is like I go down about like what's the biggest possible impact. And the third thing is I'd say just like hire, depending if you can do it or not for that person. If you can't, just hire a growth person and like ask them to like go through and ideate through that, and build some very scrappy ways to generate leads and see like what's the volume, what's the conversion rate, what's the revenue. That's what I ask my team to do.
Sweet. Yeah, to add to that real quick, I feel like, you're right, absolutely right. There's so much noise. The market is very crowded, a lot of data providers and all of that. I think that usually that people that are, most sophisticated sales teams, they will have like a group of, let's say 2-3 account executives, SDRs, or whoever, who will take the trial, go through the trial, really try it before they buy it. Right. And usually these people, they know everything. They know about the tools. They've used them in their past jobs and all of that. So I would say one person should control which data providers the whole company is using. And then this person should constantly run these trials with different companies to assess whether this data is valuable, whether it can help them with their ideal customer profile, et cetera, et cetera. But if everybody's moving in their own directions in terms of, hey, I want to use this tool, I want to use this tool for prospecting, I want to use this tool for that becomes a mess. And every time I look at somebody's CRM, it's just a lot of mass data. It's crazy. So somebody, usually it's let's say sales ops, marketing ops. Sometimes people call them revenue ops people. They need to control it and they need to own this whole process, in my opinion.
Sweet. Next question is a very serious one. Close.io rocks, and I will take that and answer it with, I agree, and you have impeccable taste in CRMs. All right, but more seriously, here's the next question, which is from Rob. How to use data to help inform your messaging, beyond just testing different messages, but for ideas for new types of messaging? What things have you seen in terms of using data, not just to go after prospects, but to message better in terms of the way you explain what you're doing or you sell what you're doing?
I mean, I've tried a bit. It's a hard one. Just like put it out there, it's hard, right? One thing that I've done is I've actually built different templates, as most of us have, and then I look at the performance of that template compared to like other data signals I have. Does that message work better for that type of company or that type of person? So for example, I use a tool called Crystal. Crystal knows. They have a pretty good API, which tells me the psychology profile of people. And it tells me like how to sell to them, how to communicate to them. And it tells me like this person is like, wants like short, let's say sentences and get to the point. That other person is more, wants like the data behind the reason. And so I use a bit of that to like inform which template we should use, and I do analysis, and I also do like control groups. Like I send like the wrong template on purpose to say, like, hey, like, am I right about what I'm doing or not? Interesting thing, it doesn't change that. It changes a bit, not as much as we think. It's not like a night and day. It's like a don't 2x. You send the wrong template. If they're in the buying motion anyway, they're going to answer you.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that a lot, and it goes back to our conversation early on when we talked about, not being creepy, right? Because if you put in your outbound messaging something like, "Hey, I noticed that you stopped using competitor name a month ago," and that make people crazy. They don't like it, and it's a good buying signal. I agree with G, but you got to be careful with this messaging, right? So I think you should use data to understand more about who you should contact. So going back to the buying signals, like these guys are ready to buy now. But when you message them, you should be very careful around the context that you put in these emails. Personalization is great, especially if you use automation. So you can say something like, hey, I noticed X and Y and Z, but make sure that you don't sound creepy by revealing too much information, especially if it's not publicly available on different sources. Like, hey, you raised money? Yeah, I can see that. That's on Crunchbase. But something deeper than that, that's gonna be creepy.
Sweet. All right. So one more question that we should address. So there's one question that we're probably not going to get to because it's too big of a one, about acquiring your first 10 customers with no inbound and overzealous investors. There's all kinds of things to unpackage here. So Jamie, if you want, you could just shoot me an email at steli@close.io and I will circle Ilya and G into that discussion. Let's see if we can help you here. But I want to quickly talk about the exact opposite case. A lot of people here were like, what do you do with the farmer example when there's like very little data online or activity online, with somebody who has a question about the exact opposite, which is something I think if you sell to startups in the technology field, you might have, where basically says, what do you do when all the data about your customers is online and all your competitors have all the data about those customers? It's just like too much competition and too easy of an access on data. How do you deal with that? Any interesting insights on that?
We're all in that, like CRMs, there's a ton of them, like live chat, like data vendors. Like there's like, we're like, each three of us are in the highly competitive, industries. And it doesn't mean that we can't make a difference, when it comes to like the experience, and the big difference isn't, okay, I can know all of that. It's how are you using that to create a better experience for your customer, for your prospective customer, and how are you making that experience so different in a good way that it's memorable, and memorable in a good way, and it's going to be hard to achieve by conventional means. So like, I mean, sure, you could have a really outstanding email, that's really out there. It's hard these days, because most people got pretty decent at email, and so you got to change your game a bit, you're going to up your game and become more personal, or touch on different channels. And one of the things that I'm working on doing this year is being able to predict not only their sales velocity or the fit, but predict the actual value that in dollars that they will bring me. So I know how much dollars I can invest on trying to close them. So I can give them the best experience possible while still keeping a positive margin, and so I can send them a gift, I can invite them, I can send them a ticket to a conference because I know that their sales velocity, their value is high enough, and so it might be complex, but I'm creating a huge difference there because my competitor is just going to take the average, and the average is not enough to create a difference. So that's how I win, or I try to at least.
Yeah, I mean, if your competitors all have access to the same data pretty much, which is hard to believe, it's hard to say, well, all the data is there online. There is always something that I think another buying signal that you can leverage. But I agree, it's all about personalization. It's all about making you stand out somehow, right? And, using some cool tools like Drift, for example, right? Like when you can be innovative and kind of try different things and reach them out at the right time. It's, again, going back to the buying signals. So I think that's the key.
Awesome. All right, man, I could talk to you guys for hours. Even if it's 2 a.m. Now I'm all like, you stimulated my brain. Now I want to work. I want to get things done. I can't go to sleep right now. I'm going to have to work for another few hours. But we'll have to wrap this up, being respectful of your time and the attendees' time. This was a ton of fun. This was very valuable. And something tells me it was not the last time we see each other and do this type of shenanigans. But before we wrap up, maybe some last words. Maybe there's a way people can get in touch with you or contact you if they want to get more information, if they want to ask you more questions. What's the best way to get a hold of you, both G and Ilya?
Yeah. So in my case, I mean, you can just LinkedIn is pretty cool. Just like send me a message on LinkedIn or by email. It's fairly easy. My email is g@drift.com. Hard to miss. And I'd say make it memorable. You know, if you want me to like remember it, we just talked at length how to make it memorable. Make it memorable. You know, make it different. Mention the fact that you listen to the webinar, not just a random intro ask. The first thing. Last thing I should say is talk to your customers. You know, try to improve the experience of the people who are already coming to you. Don't, you know, if you don't have live chat, if you don't have a good funnel, don't ask me how to like find more out there. It's a waste of resources. You know, don't waste your resources. Be efficient. You know, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, last words of wisdom. I don't know. I guess data is the new oil. That's kind of the thing that keeps me up at night, keeps me going. So that's always, you know, the time we live in. It's awesome. It's exciting. So best way to get in touch with me. I don't have such a memorable email address as G, so it's just Ilya, ILYA at datanize.com. LinkedIn also works. So I'd love to get in touch with you guys. If there are any more questions, I'm here for you. So
awesome. So for me, LinkedIn does not work. I have like about 7,000 requests that are waiting to be. I'm bankrupt on LinkedIn. I'm not even logging in on it anymore. So best way to get hold of me, just shoot me an email, Steli, Steli @close.io. I'm actually writing the next book that we're going to publish is going to be about talking to your fucking customers, customer intimacy, right? The whole
Keep
book
that
on
title.
like, huh?
Keep the title.
Yeah, I'm serious. I'm serious. So I will double click on that one. Yeah, guys, this was an honor and a pleasure. You're both black belt masters in data, so it was super dope to talk to you. Thanks for everybody for paying attention, for listening. If you're watching this recording, thanks for giving us your time and attention. And let's go out there and let's close some more deals and create some more value for our customers. Until next time from us, this is it. Bye-bye, everybody.